Hi, welcome to this tutorial. So in this tutorial, we are going to be creating a counter in JavaScript. Actually, we are going to create multiple counters in JavaScript, different ways of creating counters. So to start with, we are going to look at a click counter, and then we are going to create increment and decrement counters. And finally, we are going to end it off with a automatic animated counter that just counts down from the number that you give, probably from 10 to 0 or something like that, 10 down to 0 or something like that. Alright, so we're going to be creating all of that. Let's see how to do that now. Let's get right into it then. So a click counter, right? So to start with, we are going to create a click counter. So I have this JavaScript practice folder, and in here I have my index.html with a basic HTML skeleton. I'll be removing anything extra that we have in here, and it's gonna have a title of JavaScript practice, and it's connected to my script file, and my script has nothing right now. Let's see what happens next. Let me save everything. To start with, I'm going to create my HTML. So for HTML, I want a H1 heading that says click counter, and then I want a button. On clicking this button, I would like to, it's gonna say click me like this, and on clicking this button, I want to say, I actually want to increment the value of this div. So I'm going to have a div. It's going to be nothing to start with, but every time I click on this button, the value inside of this div is going to change. Okay, so let's look at how to do that. To start with, I'm going to receive all of the elements that I just created, except for the title, because the title is not going to be changed. The rest of it, which is dynamic, because when I press on the button, something has to happen, so that's dynamic. And the div element has to change value, that's dynamic. So let's do this. Document.getElement by ID, and I'm going to receive the button right here. And then the count element, which actually, as you know, it's going to have the, it's going to have the updated value of the count. All right, I'm actually receiving them as the same. Okay, I'm using the same name, but this is completely different from this. This is the HTML element, the ID of the HTML element. This is your JavaScript element. Okay, JavaScript variable, which is containing this HTML element. You can name this anything you want. Actually, I'm using the same name for both because I just want to be able to remember what it is. That's it. And also, let's give our C as 0, which means the count is 0. So so when we start off, it's going to start off with a 0. And also, to start with, let's give some preliminary values to our count div element. So the button was clicked C times. To start with, it's going to start with a 0. So it's going to say the button was clicked 0 times. So if you look at the output right now, see, you have the click counter, you have the click me button, and then it says the button was clicked 0 times. All right. And actually, if you want, you can have a BR in here, or you can design it later on, but I would not be, I would like to not design it actually, because I want to focus more on the JavaScript aspect of things. But if you'd like, you can have your BR tags to give it some space, just some preliminary design styling section. So now we have everything. We've gotten the button, we've gotten the count, we have the preliminary inner text in here. So finally, let's create an event listener, a click event listener. Okay, basically it says every time this button is clicked, what do you need to do? I'm going to have an anonymous arrow function in here. You can have the name of the function in here as well, and then create a separate function if that's what you want. I'm keeping things simple in here. So every time the button is clicked, the value of C has to be incremented by 1. So I'm using C++. And also the inner text, right? The exact same thing that I have here. It has to be assigned again because the value of C has changed now. So before it was 0, then once you click on it, it's going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, and so on and so forth. Alright, so that's how your click counter works. Let's check it out. There you go. It says button was clicked 0 times. Click 1. Click 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It'll just keep going like that. So that is your click counter. Now let's just modify this same thing into an incremental and decremental counter, or increment and decrement counter, whatever you want to call it. So for this, we just need some things to change. For example, we need 2 buttons instead of 1. So you're going to have your increment button, INC, which is going to be just the plus. And then immediately after, you're also going to have the DEC button, which is going to be minus. Okay, I'm placing these buttons side by side like this, and later on it's going to say the button, we're also going to have the same div. That's fine. Alright, so now in here, instead of just getting 1 button, I need to get both the buttons. So I need to get in. Okay, and copy this and paste this. I need to get the decrement button as well. So I'm getting both the buttons. We have this right here, the count value, the initial value, the initial text, all of that is the same. But in here, I'm not going to have a whole string in here. Okay, I'm just going to have the value, just the value. So increment, decrement, just the value, and here too, just the value. Alright, so every time we press on the button, but this is where the change happens. Okay, we need 2 event listeners, not just 1. So when you press on the increment button, you want the C value to be incremented and your count to be updated accordingly. Similarly, when you press on the decrement button, you want your count value to be decremented by 1 and the inner text to be updated accordingly. Simple as that. That's all the difference there is in this particular example. Let's look at this. See, when I press on the plus button, it says 1, 2, 3, say it'll just keep going like that. Similarly, when I press on the minus, it'll keep decrementing. It'll actually keep going towards the minus if you let it go. You can create catch conditions for this. For example, you can create something like if C is less than 0, then just make C 0. That's it. So you're not going to do anything else. Alright, so if C is less than 0, we're going to make C as 0 and do this. Otherwise, else, what we're going to do is we're going to have to decrement our C value. Actually, we can just get this from here and have just 1 inner text after this. So if C is less than 0, make it 0. If not, make it decrement it, and finally update the inner text. Right, so if we go for this, alright, so let's look at if it works. Oops, it still doesn't work. Okay, I think the problem is that we are catching it too late. Why don't we catch it when it's 0 as well? So if it's 0, let's just catch it at that, and that's it. Alright, so if we do it like that, if I try to increment it, nothing happens. If I decrement it, perfect. If I increment it, perfect. Decrement at 0, it just stops. So perfect. So that's how your increment and decrement counter can be done, and you can actually modify it in any way you want. You can add catch conditions just like the one I just showed you right now. Alright, so now that we've done all of that, let's go ahead and create an animated counter using set interval. Alright, so I'm just going to remove this entire thing because it's going to be a completely different piece of code. Alright, so in here, I'm going to have a h1 that says countdown timer like this. Alright, and then I'm going to have a button of ID button, which is going to say start timer. So when I press on this particular button, the timer has to start, and obviously I need I'm going to make this a h2. Okay, of ID h2. So this is going to be the value. This is going to be the element that's going to contain my countdown. Okay, I'm not designing this just like usual because I'm going to focus on the JavaScript aspect of things. Alright, so now let's receive all of the buttons. So let button is equal to document.get element by ID of button. Alright, and similarly let's receive our timer as well. So that's the next one that we need. The timer is the h2. What's it called? Okay, I'm gonna name this timer because it's going to have a timer. So I'm gonna make its ID timer. Alright, so timer That's it. Alright, so we got both of this, and now I don't need a counter in here. I actually need the seconds. So seconds is from where the countdown needs to happen. So right now I've made the seconds as 10 to indicate that it has to count down from 10. Make sense? Okay, so you can make this value anything you want. It's completely dynamic. You can change this, or you can get a user value as well. So you can ask the value from the user, and then you can count down from that as well. Alright, then let's create a event listener for our button, just like usual. It's going to be a click event listener. Again, just like usual. Right, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an interval. So I'm going to name this interval before I create it. Now that's because when I want to stop the interval, because at 0 it has to completely stop. So when I want to stop the interval, I would have to use the clear interval, and for clear interval you need to know the name, because you might have hundreds of intervals in your code, right? Which one do you want to stop? So if you name this, then you can stop just this particular interval that you create. So you can give it any name you want. It doesn't have to be interval. Alright, so for interval you have two arguments. The first argument is the function. The second argument is the seconds, or in the milliseconds. Okay, these are the two you need. So the first one I'm going to be creating is an anonymous function. You can give the name of the function as well, but I would rather create an anonymous function in here. Alright, so anonymous function. Let's start with what I'm going to do is, so I'm just going to take the timer and change the inner text of it to sex, and it's going to be sex minus minus. That's it. Alright, and then the milliseconds is going to be 1000, which means it's going to get updated. This is going to run for every second. Okay, 1000 milliseconds is actually 1 second, so it's going to run for every second. Now if you look at the output, preliminary output, let's see. Oops, I think we are getting, yeah, it's okay. 4, 3, 2, 1. Oops. It keeps going and going and going. Why is that? It has to stop at 0, right? It's not stopping at 0. Well, that's mainly because we are not giving a stopping condition in here. So we need to know if the sex value is equal to 0. So if it's equal to 0, it means we need to stop. So I'm going to give the timer value, timer.innerText. I'm going to update it for the last time so it doesn't go to -1. And then I'm going to use the clear interval method and ask it to change the interval variable which contains our interval. So if you notice, we are placing the clear interval right inside of the interval. So it works more like the break statement, you know. Alright, so this is how you do this. And finally return, so we get out of this particular anonymous function and essentially out of the entire event listener. So now if you look at the output, let's refresh. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you go. It just stops. So it's a proper timer. You can actually reduce this in any way. For example, instead of sex minus minus, you can make it -0.1 or something, and you can make this run for every 100 milliseconds or just 10 milliseconds, so it will run very fast. So you can do things like that as well. Alright, so that's it for this particular tutorial. So we looked at 3 different ways of creating our counters. I really hope it was an interesting tutorial. If it was, please like the video and please subscribe, and when you subscribe, please press on the bell button so that you can get the notifications whenever I post a new video. So I'll be posting a lot of videos like this. I post every day, and these videos are more like an question answer format, right? So I'll be posting videos like this. I'll be posting small apps, okay, where I create small apps, and I'll be posting tutorials, general tutorials as well, or mini courses, things like that. So I'll be posting a lot of content on this particular channel. So I really hope you like things, and if you have any doubts, if you have any content suggestions, please send them all via the comments. I'll try to answer as many of your comments as I can. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. Please subscribe. Thank you.